Sega.
Fighting Vipers.
Fighting Vipers is a fighting game from AM2, the team behind the Virtua Fighter games. The main differences here are that the fights take place in essentially cages, whilst each fighter has destructible body armour that can be knocked off, theoretically making it easier to beat them. I'm no expert in this game, so get ready to enjoy a video of someone playing Fighting Vipers badly. First, we'll look at the 1995 arcade version running on Sega's Model 2B CRX hardware. This I'll run using the Sega Model 2 emulator. Then we'll compare it to the ports included inside the Ryuga Gotoku studio titles Judgment and Lost Judgment, both from 2022, to see how the port looks and if they are truly identical. The arcade version released in a number of cabinet types, including, apparently, a deluxe sit-down unit. All of them allow two players to go head-to-head. What's notable is that the Japanese version had some differences to the US and export versions of the game. I'll focus on the Japanese version though, as that's what appears in the two Judgment games. The Japanese arcade version begins with a Sega logo, then a rolling demo introducing all the characters. There's Tokyo, an ex-gang member, Jane, a failed Marine, Raxel, a guitarist from Death Crunch, Grace, a fashion model, Picky, a kid with a Pepsi-branded skateboard, Sandman, a mystery man with a love for the number 3, Honey, a designer, and Barn, a former gang leader. There are also two boss characters. The intro continues with a fight between Honey and Barn, which uses some curious angles. The logo then shows up, before a stage that heavily promotes Pepsi. This was a product placement time for both the Japanese arcade and Saturn ports. Next we see the characters again. Here's Tokyo advertising Pepsi, Jane getting cross with her reflection, Raxel having a strum, Grace loving her reflection, Picky doing a poor skating stunt, Sandman having a scratch, Honey grooving, and Barn brooding. The intro then repeats using different scenes for the fights. The US version is pretty much identical, except the Pepsi logo has gone from Picky's skateboard, Honey is now called Candy, and Tokyo has lost his Pepsi can. It's also worth noting at this point that the colours in the Model 2 emulator are a bit darker than they should be. In Virtua Fighter 2 I tweaked to the CRT gain and bias settings, and you can do so in this game as well, but I thought it looked okay and didn't want to guess at what the settings should be here. Anyway, let's play the Japanese version. First, you can choose from the range of characters available. I'll go with Raxel, as I like my rock music. First up, it's a battle against Barn in a Wild West themed area. Barn is fairly easily defeated, and I even knock him through the fence at the end. Stage 2 is Grace in this dockside arena. Things started well in the first round, but the second round she kicked my butt, and things only got worse in the third round. I inserted another pretend credit and she beat me again. In the next fight I even managed to destroy her body armour, which is meant to make things easier, but she took it to 3 rounds and knocked off my armour before I finally beat her. And then came Picky. It wasn't long before he totally beat me in 2 straight fights, so it's time to cheat a bit. I changed the game from normal to easy level and tried again. And Picky still beat me. But when I tried once more, despite losing my armour, I finally defeated him. On to Tokyo on a runway. Yeah, this seems safe. Things go fairly well here, and I defeat him in 2 fights. Next up is the self-proclaimed Big Mother, Sandman, in an evening version of the first stage. He chucks me into the wall for a first round victory. So I smash him into a giant bear in revenge in the second round. I then smash off his armour and win the round. Next up is Honey. In the first round she beats me by having more energy at the end. In the second round you can see graffiti saying RIP Honey, so I'm not entirely sure who I'm fighting. But she beats me anyway. After a second fight, where she smashes me through the entire wall, I think this is enough of the arcade version, so enjoy a minute of this version without me talking over it.
Go!
2022, Fighting Vipers appeared as an in-game Sega arcade in both Judgment and Lost Judgment. But how do these official ported titles fare, and are they identical or not? Let's play both quickly, then compare all three versions of the game at the pixel level to find out. In Judgment, you can first find the game in this small Club Sega arcade. Yes, I'll play. The intro shows how the colours of this port are a bit brighter than the Model 2 emulator, with higher resolution graphics, but they also added some fake scan lines to make it look more like a monitor that I'm less of a fan of. At least the picture is full screen with no fake arcade units surrounding the image. Picky no longer advertises Pepsi though, but Honey isn't called Candy, so it's a sort of hybrid of the Japanese version and the US Pepsi free release. In the opening fight, there's an advert for the ranking mode, which the Model 2 emulator either isn't displaying properly, or it wasn't present on the ROM set that's available for that emulator. The second fight shows that the Pepsi branding has been removed from the scene, along with the shadows in this version are now truly transparent and not using pixel mesh effects. The second character screen again looks better as the reflections no longer use meshes on the mirror. Let's start a fight. Everything is definitely brighter here, as the arcade might be on a correct monitor, even without tweaks to the biasing gain. Barn is easily dispatched in 2 rounds, whereupon I get a bonus in Judgment for beating him. Grace is up next, and you can now see grass outside of the arena, which is a bit too dark on the Model 2 emulator's default colour settings. Again, I knock off her armour, and again she thanks me by defeating me. Eventually, I win though. Picky's stage now advertises Fighting Vipers instead of Pepsi. He manages to beat me in the first round, then I take round 2, and round 3 scattering his armour. Tokyo smashes my head into a fence, then I smash his armour and beat him in round 2. And round 3 is mine. Sandman next, and I only just beat him in round 1. Round 2 he dumps me into the ground to level the score. And in round 3 he disrobes me, then chucks me away. One more virtual credit, and I eventually crash and smash him into oblivion. Over to Honey and the weird choice of graffiti. The first round I find surprisingly easy, but it's not long until she beats me in round 2. Despite me knocking off her armour in round 3, it just makes her more determined, and I'm kicked out of the game, literally. So let's go over to Lost Judgment. Again, the game is in the same arcade, but the screens on the machines are better animated here. The game helpfully shows you the controls before you begin. Everything appears to be identical to the version in Judgment, with Pepsi removed, yet Honey remaining. Barn puts up more of an effort here and defeats me. A loss in round 1. Let's put in another credit. And soon Barn is joining the inflatable bear. Grace comes along and destroys me the first time. Another credit, and I eventually defeat her. Picky next, and whilst he takes the first round, it's not long until I smash the little guy and move along. Tokyo swiftly smashes me out of the cage, but I come back strong and take the next 2 rounds to move on to Sandman. And whilst it gets very close at the end, the big guy ends up smashing me skywards. He then proceeds to decimate me again in round 2. Time for yet another credit. The next fight goes all the way to the 3rd round, but I eventually take him out. Honey is next, and so far I've failed to beat her, but the first round here goes pretty well, and I leave her on top of the wall. Usually I'd expect to be smashed into oblivion thereafter, but unusually, I actually win here. So it's time to fight myself in a big elevator. I'm not sure who has the coolest look here though, and it's not long before I'm defeated by myself. The second round goes pretty much the same way, and that's enough of this version. Both versions appear to be very close. Here's a minute of the Lost Judgment version in action.
Go!
Let's compare 3 scenes from the arcade to the Judgment and Lost Judgment ports. First of all, here's Honey in the arcade version. Note the low resolution of just 496 by 384 pixels. The picture here is quite dark, as I didn't tweak the CRT settings in-game. Wiping across to the Judgment version, you can see its brighter colours. Honey's glove blends into the background, higher resolution graphics, and fake scanline effect. It also runs at 4:3 aspect ratio, so is a little wider than the arcade original. And here's Lost Judgment, showing it's pretty much identical. Next up, here's the opening fight in the arcade between Grace and Barn. Once again, many of the colours are quite dark here. Wiping to the Judgment version, you can see how the aspect ratio makes everything a little bit more stretched, though on a real arcade the Model 2 version would likely have stretched to 4:3 as well. I did try to render the arcade version at the same dimensions, but it messed up the mesh shadow effects. Here's Lost Judgment, a fraction of a second different, which otherwise is pretty much identical. Finally, here's Picky and Honey on the runway. Note the Pepsi sponsorship, as well as the shadow under the plane, using the one-on, one-off pixel mesh effect. Wiping to Judgment lightens the scene, but note the large dark area at the end of the runway. I think this might be a MIP mapping related issue with the ports. Wiping to Lost Judgment, it seems to have a tidier background, but that's not always the case if you watch the video of that version in action. It is basically identical to the Judgment version. Let's put the arcade and both ports head to head across all 6 stages.
Round 1. Let the action begin. Go! Go!
Fighting Vipers isn't quite as classic as the Virtua Fighter games, but does have some rather interesting mechanics. It may depend on how well you take to the rather unique characters that fight in this game, and whether you think the armour falling off is just a little bit tacky or not. There's little to no difference between the ports in Judgment and Lost Judgment. They both look better and play smoother than the arcade, plus explain, albeit in Japanese, how to access the ranking mode so you can set a high score. They also have combinations of buttons mapped to the rear buttons on a controller, which makes it a bit easier to pull off some of the more interesting moves. If I had to pick a version of Fighting Vipers, I'd say go for either of the Judgment games. They just have the edge with regards to colours and controls. Although if you're a huge fan of Pepsi, at least the Japanese arcade version has that going for it. If you enjoyed this comparison of Fighting Vipers, then give it a like, or subscribe, ring the bell, etc. to be notified when I upload something new. And join me next time for the world's most dangerous motorcycle race.